So what are some of the titles in my board gaming collection? Titles that, based on my player personality, that I regularly play, that I enjoy, that have been in that rotation, that have made up a part of my board gaming life. That's what I want to explore in this vlog, keeping it brief for each title, offering a couple of points of why I enjoy the game or why it's in my collection, and of course, really answering that question, plugging into the board gaming community. Titles in my collection, maybe you agree, disagree, or maybe you're looking for a starting point for new titles in your own collection, right? That eternal board gaming question, will this have a place in my gaming collection? Now, in following my vlogs for board games, I pushed up a number of them to the channel here under the board gaming playlist. I have these three groups that kind of frame the question. Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3, Group 1, Group 2, Group 3. Group 1 are titles that I regularly play. They really don't make it onto the gaming shelf. They're kind of under the table, at the table in various boxes because I'm either playing them solo all the time or I'm regularly bringing them to the gaming club or the gaming group. Tier 2, or pile number 2, are games that I really enjoy. I would love to play them more. I try to play them more, but the stars have to kind of align in a certain way for that to happen. Campaign-based or a long type game. It's not the type of game that you just kind of sit down, set up, and play. Not that you can't, but it takes a little bit of navigating. And I'm going to focus on two titles from that group. And then Tier 3, I'm going to leave to the side for the moment. These are games that I enjoy. They're a lot of fun, but the crossover is there with other aspects of my gaming life. Perfect example, Space Hulk. Man versus aliens set in the Warhammer 40K universe. I play a lot of Warhammer 40K. So I get that fix kind of from there, and I picked up Space Hulk because I like the Grimdark. So there's nothing necessarily wrong with these titles. Axis and Allies, Samurai Sword, games that are a little bit lighter in play. They come out every now and then. So Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3, focusing on Tier 1, the current rotation. The first is Runebound. I love Runebound 2nd edition. I love Runebound 3rd edition. The combat mechanics are different than both. Runebound 2nd and 3rd are currently out of print, but Runebound 2nd, ironically, is a little bit easier to find secondhand than 3rd. 3rd being out of print, of course, currently high prices. This is an overland dungeon-esque crawler type RPG. It works. It plays. You go on quests. You get gear. You fight an end boss, whether that's a necromancer or a dragon lord rising, and it works. The flow of the game is kind of nice. The mechanics of both of them I enjoy. When I feel like having a game where I'm going to go in, level up, get some loot, and not have it be a dungeon crawler focus, but more of an overland, I pull down Runebound. Second would be Dark Souls. Now, what's interesting about this game is I was not aware of the whole Dark Souls kind of culture out there. I played the video game a couple of times on a friend's console back in the day, so I missed the Kickstarter. But then in hearing about this game and exploring this game, what really captured my attention was the fact that you have random item drops. I love Diablo. I'm waiting for Diablo the board game. We explored that last week. Where's my Diablo the board game? I don't want to say Dark Souls. I don't want to commit that heresy and say Dark Souls equals Diablo the board game. But this engine feels like I'm playing Diablo. You go in, you beat on a bunch of Dark Souls minions. They kind of have a very, very basic AI with how they work. You get some souls. You spend the souls and you randomly draw gear cards from the blacksmith. Some you can use right away, some you can't use right away. Use the souls to power up. There's sockets that you can put gems in and you can upgrade gear. The idea is to get good and then fight a mini boss. Then go through another dungeon and fight a main boss. What's interesting is the AI of the game for the mini bosses and the main boss are controlled by a deck of cards that are randomized. And it has this feeling of the you fighting the boss and something else is controlling the boss. It's very much a winner take all, because if you run out of sparks, then you're done. The game's over. I enjoy it for a dungeon crawler, level up, fighting minions, fighting a boss monster. It's essentially a fight-based game. Why am I in the dungeon? I don't know. Dark Souls, something. I don't know. But even if you're not a fan of the Dark Souls universe, if you are, it's no problem. If you're not a fan of the Dark Souls universe, I find that it works. The challenge with the game, and this is not to be found just in this game, many titles, there are numerous expansions to it. The core has a lot of value, but if you find yourself being a completionist with poor impulse control, it's going to be a pretty hefty layout. Now, I've been able to acquire it over time, but even if you were looking for a title that works, if this type of game sounds like it, and you're looking at the Play Online, you can get the core game, you get the Adventurers Pack, which gives you some more heroes, and then you buy one of the mini-boss expansions and the mega-boss expansions, maybe one, fight a dragon. Always worth fighting a dragon. What's interesting about Dark Souls is the series of expansions are these mega-bosses. So you fight a mini-boss, a main boss. The mega-bosses are so overpowerful, so crazy epic with their abilities and their skills. You're like, we don't even remotely stand a chance. You just get crushed. Some of the hardest board game encounters that I've ever faced. A lot of fun. So for me, this game regularly hits the table. I really enjoy it for what it does, for how it works. This next title of Dreams and Shadows, it's a standalone board game. There is one expansion for it, but it's reasonable. This game is interesting because it works really well solo, as does Dark Souls, as does Runebound, but it also works well with a group. And essentially, it's a kind of a grim, dark, gothic fantasy game that tells a story. Now, the combat mechanics are somewhat simple. You roll a d6 and you compare. There are some skill checks, but what I enjoy about the game is the pace and the time of it. There's different bosses, end bosses, an undead king, a dragon, and they're slowly taking over the realm. You're on a timer to defeat them. And the way you have to defeat them, of course, is bashing down monsters, but also achieving mission goals to weaken them for that final fight. If you don't, and you take them on for the final fight, they're going to be really powerful. And as you go through, there's quest cards, there's narratives. You read from these cards, you make some decisions. It's kind of half choose your own adventure, half board game, half puzzle game. It works. It's a lot of fun. The setting is brutal, though. I mean, it's very kind of gothic and advanced from that perspective. And some of the encounters that are random are extremely powerful. I don't want to give away any spoilers if you're playing this title or thinking of this title. But when you fight, you discover some ruins. You flip a card over, there could be like a mini-boss or a lieutenant in there. That is extremely powerful. If you draw that early on and you don't escape, you're in a lot of trouble. But if you're like me, you say, well, look, if I roll hot, if I roll legendary, this is an amazing chance to do this. We're going to gamble it. We're going to take it. Where the game also really shines, in my opinion, and of course this is a matter of perspective, the artwork is fantastic. The artwork on the cards, the artwork on the characters, the standees, they're not miniatures, and I'm a big miniature fan, but they're standees, so they're in color, they're hard cardboard. Everything looks amazing. I mean, this is the type of game that the mechanics are really, they're solid. The mechanics are an excuse to pull you into the narrative, to pull you into this world, and the artwork does that. It's very close to feeling like I'm in a role-playing type game. But it is hard. It is very challenging. If you're solo, you're going to have to play multiple characters, multiple heroes. So of Dreams and Shadows, highly recommended. And again, it's a standalone game. There is one small expansion, so it's not going to hit you too hard. And both of those things, massive replayability. HeroQuest. Anything more to really be said about HeroQuest? We got a reprint. I had the original. I didn't have any expansions for the original, so now the chance to kind of play out that, absolutely. Jumping into HeroQuest, light mechanics, it works. It's a lot of fun. It's beer and pretzels. It doesn't take itself that seriously. The thing that I don't like about HeroQuest, you can't play it solo. I mean, I know there's some engines that do it and some random stuff, but the whole point of the game is someone controlling the monsters, someone revealing the dungeon, and that mystery of not knowing what's around the corner. I have to say, being an older game with a very simple engine, it works. The way the dungeon populates, the furniture, the characters. We're getting lots and lots of HeroQuest support. This is a title that if I had a group that I played with or players I could regularly pull in, especially maybe if they're role-playing games or wargamers, maybe not necessarily dedicated board gamers, it's very easy to pick up. This is something that I would jump in. But if you're looking for solo or you're primarily solo play, it's not supported. A couple of homebrew engines out there, they're okay. I mean, you could, but there are other titles that I would consider looking to solo. But HeroQuest, love it. Zombicide Invader, Zombicide Black Plague. These games for me work on multiple levels, and I've pushed up to my playlist here, Board Gaming Tactica, exploring some of it. For me, what works, the mechanics are simple enough. They work. You have zombies if it's Black Plague. You have aliens if it's Invader. You've got missions. You've got to search. You've got to escape. And more, the game populates with miniatures. It's interesting because when you set the game up, someone comes over and they're like, wow, like there's hundreds of miniatures there in the box. Are we going to use them all? Yeah, by like turn 4, they're all going to be out on the table. And what I love about it is this feeling in a good way. I don't like pressure. Nobody likes pressure. But in a good way, you're playing the game, you're searching, okay, 10 zombies, 15, 20, an abomination. That's okay, they're on the other side of the board. Then next thing you know, you're literally knee deep in miniatures. Just everywhere. Lots of replayability, lots of randomness. It's a D6 based game. You level up, you've got some abilities. It just works. It works. So the visuals of that and the fact that after the first turn, you understand the rules. So being able to bring this to an open gaming night with people that are interested in any type of board game, it's always easy to find players. Solo replayability, right there. Absolutely. Control 6 characters or have 6 players each control a character. You can scale it up and down. It plays solo very, very well. The choice of Black Plague or Invader, for a long time, I was Black Plague enthusiast. Invader dropped. Invader is essentially reskinned mechanics set in a sci-fi perspective. I really enjoy Invader simply because the mechanics, but also in my collection, I don't really have a lot of sci-fi based games that are out there. So I could use that to justify my conscience buying it. But also when I pull it out to play, I'm playing both those narratives, a game engine that I enjoy and a universe that isn't always done in that way. Massive Darkness 1. I like Massive Darkness because, again, it works. It's a dungeon crawler based game, miniature heavy. You open a room, you spawn some minions, you beat on them, you get some treasure, you roll lots of dice. There's various missions, explore to the end, kill the boss. The 2 mechanics that I really like about this game, well, 3. One of them is not a mechanic. Visually, great artwork, lots of cool miniatures. It just has nice tabletop presence. The mechanics that I like are the fact that it has roaming monsters. It has 2 classes of monsters. These minions that you bash and beat up. But then at various points, kind of mini bosses that spawn and run around the dungeon trying to beat on you. And they each have different abilities. Now, in some missions, they appear as a boss. But the fact that it's just not run through the dungeon and beat on minions, there's these more powerful monsters, and they're random when they spawn and how they appear, not only with replayability, but it works. If you're looking for a fast-based miniature bashing dungeon crawler, Massive Darkness, absolutely. Massive Darkness 1 is still in print. MD2 is out. Same engine, kind of different storyline. The other thing that works, and this doesn't work for everybody, Massive Darkness was ambitious in that it wanted to take a role-playing experience and condense it into one dungeon. So in a role-playing experience, you start out level 1, and you level up, you gain abilities. At the end of the campaign, 8 months later, you're level 10 or level 12. Think about Dungeons and Dragons. Massive Darkness, when you come in, your characters are base, but then as you beat on the monsters, you gain experience, and you level up very quickly. And as you level up, not only do the monsters become more powerful, but you can unlock different gear, different abilities. There's a character progression chart you get to pick along the way of the skills you want. So literally by the end of the dungeon, you are very, very powerful and jacked up with what you can do. I like this. Yes, it's super accelerated. Yes, it might be a little too fast for level up, but it captures that dungeon crawler, RPG, light play, dice thrower game very, very well. And it regularly hits the table. There are lots of expansions out there, character packs, monster packs, so you have to be ready for that. But the core itself, massive replayability. How's that for a tie-in for Massive Darkness? You could do core and 2 of the monster expansions for some variety and be perfectly fine and not missing out living off of that for a long, long time. Pathfinder, the adventure card game. We're about halfway through my tier 1 here. Pathfinder adventure card game, Rise of the Rune Lords. It's out of print. You could probably find a core set if it interests you. This is a card-based game. No miniatures in sight. You've got standees. For me, I like the random element of it. You have a character, and your character's health and abilities are tied to a deck of cards. You expend this deck of cards to take actions, to fight. When it runs out, you're dead. You take damage, you remove cards. As you explore these locations, the locations are built ahead of time out of random cards. So you might be going to the abandoned tower. There'll be 2 monster cards, 2 item cards, an event card, and a trap card. So you pull those from the deck, you randomly put them in there. You don't really know what you're going to find. The interesting mechanic is there's a boss or objective in one of those decks randomly seated. Your job is to find and defeat that boss and close all the locations. At the same time, you can acquire cards, weapons, spells, abilities, consumables, potions, and trade them and swap them in and out. The game is campaign-based. Takes a long time to play. It's a little bit, the mechanics are good, but you got to organize all these cards. I enjoy it for the narrative. I enjoy it for the randomness. It is an excellent solo playing game. I've played it with groups, continue to play it with groups, setup, breakdown, campaign play. I don't know if it's the best pickup type game for playing with a dedicated group, possibly. It is out of print. There is a second edition that's out of print, but sourcing out Rune Lords, it should be somewhat easy, and I know there's a lot on the secondary market. I enjoy the game, and I'm glad that I had picked it up at the time. Blackstone Fortress. You know Games Workshop was going to be somewhere in there. Briefly mentioning Blackstone Fortress, and I say briefly because it's out of print. Being GW, there was never enough stock. There's a ton of expansions in it. I mean, we're going through the collection. I can't, in good faith, recommend this game, and that makes me sad because I enjoy the game, and it has some innovative mechanics from that perspective. But to try and acquire it secondhand and to try and acquire all the expansions, I don't want to say impossible, but impossible. The game is set in the Warhammer 40K universe. Now you said, well, Fritz, your tier 3 games like Space Hulk and Relic, you play 40K. Why don't you pull them in? Well, Blackstone Fortress kind of overrides that because I get to play in the 40K universe. It's a dungeon crawler based game set in space. This idea of a Blackstone Fortress, a space station created by, depending on who you ask, the Necrons, the old ones. I know GW is changing that all the time. And you're an explorer going into this space station, this Blackstone Fortress that is ever changing and shifting. and there's monsters there, and there's chaos there, and there's mission objectives. You level up, you get items, you get gear, you go back to your ship, you sell stuff. It plays. It works well. The AI is just good enough. It plays as a solo, plays as a group. The various expansions push out the Blackstone Fortress, push out the narrative, add a lot of replayability, and there's a lot of expansions. But I can't recommend it because just out of print, hard to find, was hard enough, no support from GW. It's a shame because much like Blackstone Fortress, much like Silver Tower, if you didn't jump in at the time, that's it. I didn't jump in on Silver Tower. This was the quest-based game because I believed Games Workshop. Hey, we're coming out with this. We're going to support it. It's going to be in print. We love you guys. We love the fans. We love the community. I should have known that right away. And I didn't, and it's out of print. I can play Silver Tower with a friend. Love to play it more, but it is what it is. So now we're going to jump into a couple of games that are a little bit different. Fireball Island. Fireball Island. Fritz, is that even a game? This is that plastic toy set type game where you roll a bunch of marbles and you have to run around. Well, the marbles are fireballs from an angry temple god, and you have to kind of collect treasures and make it off the island. It's dexterity based. It's random based. This is the type of game where it's just a lot of fun to play. Sometimes the marbles move in weird ways. Sometimes they do a lot of different weird stuff. You never really know what's going to happen. You got a little tiger figure that you kind of flick with your fingers that always just flies off and hits somebody else. This is the type of game that I do regularly bring with me to play when we're sitting around and we're like, what do we feel like playing? Or if it's like, look, we're burnt, man. We've played so many Euros and we've played so many dungeon crawlers. Let's just do something totally different, a totally different board game. And because it's a 3D physical dexterity random type board game, it's just a lot of fun. It's just a lot of fun. And at least here locally in Barnes & Noble and other places and online, it's like $40. It's not a huge amount. It is an investment, but it's the type of game that's just total beer and pretzels. Feel like playing, feel like having a lot of fun. You can solo it because the marbles are random, although if you're playing with other people, you're going to try and nail them with the marbles and the fireballs and all the crazy stuff. It does shine with players, but it is what it is. It's an interesting game. Talisman. If you've been following my channel, you know I love Talisman. This is probably one of the longest and oldest games that I've ever played. Got involved with Talisman, playing D&D with my buddies years ago. And after D&D or before D&D, this is when I had a lot more time. We'd play D&D like all day Saturday. We'd start at 9 in the morning and go to 2 or 3 in the morning. It's just absolutely crazy. I wouldn't trade that time away. It was what it was when it was. But we'd also play Talisman. It works for me. It's a lot of fun. It's part of my gaming culture, gaming life. Lots of expansions, big boxes, small boxes. I would say the game is a massive commitment to play. It's a table hog. It takes a long time to play. Would I recommend it? I would say really check it out before that. And that's hard to say because I love the game, and that with Runebound is one that I regularly play. But it's card-based. It takes a long time. You want all the expansions. It's an acquired taste or a specialized taste. But it is there in pile number one, and we do regularly play it. So now moving into some interesting titles. Then two mentioning for table 2, pile 2. Nemesis. I did not jump in on the Kickstarter. For now, I'm purposely focusing on just the core box. I have to say, the rules work. The rule book is not the best, but I don't hold that against it. Takes a little bit of understanding the rules. I really enjoy this game. The miniatures and components are absolutely fantastic. The alien miniatures themselves, I've painted, they pull double duty in my Warhammer 40k Tyranid army. They're that good. And essentially, You're on a spaceship, aliens there, you got to try and escape. You got to try and get some gear. You got to try and navigate all that. You got to repair some systems. It's a great co-op game. It's a good solo game. And it really captures that feeling of aliens being on this spaceship and you need to escape or you need to make something happen. And the rules combined with the components absolutely work. I would recommend Nemesis if you're looking for a solo sci-fi alien game. If you're looking for a more, I'm on the spaceship and I have to survive from that perspective and I really don't know what's going to spawn or where it's going to spawn or how I do it, you go with Nemesis. If you're looking for this facility is overrun and there's tons and tons of alien models everywhere, you go Zombicide Invader. You're looking for detailed rules and kind of tight rule play, Nemesis. You're looking for just rolling lots of dice and blasting aliens, you look for Invader. You can't make up your mind, you're eventually going to go for both. But they bookend, they complement each other really, really well. Magic Realm. So I was very, very fortunate. This is a title that I've always wanted. I've always looked to make my own copy. I was very, very fortunate and very, very lucky to be gifted a copy from a subscriber from my channel here, which I'm eternally grateful for. And I'm going to be pushing up some Magic Realm stuff because I finally feel like I can play the game, understand some tactics, and get the rules right 80% of the time, which is pretty good. The game is fantastic. The game really is. It's the closest thing. It's beyond D&D with how I play. I have only played it solo. I mean, I played 2 games with some friends, but we didn't know what was going on. It's really quite an experience to look at some of the videos online and some of the playthroughs and acquire a copy or make a copy. I think like if I was going to just play one solo game for the next 5 years, out of everything in my collection, this is what I would grab. And that's saying a lot because Runebound, I love. Dark Souls, I could regularly play those games solo, but Magic Realm just has so much to offer. It works. If there was a reprint, I would pick that up. Absolutely. Fantastic. AVP and Conan. Aliens versus Predator and Conan. 2 titles that I'm there. I love Conan. I love Aliens versus Predator. Jumping in, playing these games. AVP is out of print. There's a lot of challenges. There was a lot of saltiness with the Kickstarter. The rules are a little clunky. It's kind of like, it's a board game, but did it start out as a miniature combat game and then got ported to a board game? There's some calculations you have to make to attack, which aren't the easiest to make. It feels like a kind of an 80s war game system. The rules are okay, but from that perspective, the reason why I play it is because it's AVP. The chance to be a colonial marine and blast away. It has campaign play. It has solo play. Would I recommend it? It's hard. I mean, it's in my collection because I'm such a fan of the movies, but it's not really something that I regularly bring to play at the group because the rules are a little bit clunky and it's out of print and it's hard to find. So as much as I love AVP and the chance to blast away some aliens, I would probably look to get that for, was it Another Day in the Core, that other Aliens title, which has things play much, much better. The reason why I haven't jumped into that, I've actually shown a little self-restraint, but eventually that'll wear down. I mean, being an AVP fan will absolutely take care of that. Conan. It's what's best in life. To play Conan, to play the Conan IP, to play this type of game, fantastic. What I love about this game, a series of mechanics that so you have one player playing the Overlord, controlling the boss and the monsters and the mission. Then you have other players playing Conan and friends. Player versus player. What I love about this game, it's essentially a skirmish miniature-based game, but the rules and the management of it is very, very unique. Something that I haven't seen implemented in other titles outside of this type of engine, you have your heroes and you have energy gems, stamina, and you get to pick how much you want to expend and what you want to do. So when it is your turn, it's not like, okay, it's your turn, you have 3 actions. You can move and then attack, or move, attack, and do these 2 other things. Search, move again. No, Conan is, here's your energy. When it runs out, you're in trouble, you're dead. And you regain some energy a little bit every turn. You get hit, you lose energy. You have a resource pool. You can do whatever you want, whenever you want, and how you want. And there's also rules for manipulation, which is success versus failure. You can augment rolls. So if I make an attack, I can add potentially more damage to the attack, exert more with these gems. First couple of games, you go on just a massive killing spree and you destroy everything turn 1 and turn 2, then you gas out and you're in trouble. But what's interesting, what I love is the fact that I can move 2 spaces, attack something with a sword, move another, kick down a door, manipulate an object. If there's another player, I can toss them something. I can move an attack, then you can move, then I can move again. A lot of collaboration with that. Likewise, on the Overlord / boss, necromancer, dude side, you have this control panel of units that you can activate, and you have your own energy resources. So different units at different times call for activation. I can augment my rolls. I can augment my abilities. There's a lot. It feels like I'm in the movie playing an action-based game. Absolutely fantastic. Miniatures, fantastic. Artwork, fantastic. Components, fantastic. The criticism that someone would say, which was handled perfectly. Fritz, it's Conan. So if I'm sitting down to play, everyone wants to play Conan. What about the other sidekicks? Conan's awesome. To play Conan, yes. To kill Conan, even better. But the other characters in the game, they've been done such a way. I mean, they've been pulled from the myth. Their abilities and their playstyle are so much fun. There's kind of a rogue stealth thief in the game. I regularly love playing him. Absolutely. With his abilities and attacks and how swift he is. They've made the other characters as fun to play and as unique, where if you don't play Conan, you're not like, oh, this is like the Conan show and I'm just here hanging out. It's done very, very well. There are other big box expansions. They're easy to acquire. The core itself, tons of miniatures, tons of replayability. You could just go core and that's it. The only criticism is if you're a completionist, this is a problem. And I've had to do my best to step away from this. It was originally released as a Kickstarter hybrid system with some challenges, meaning there were going to be pieces that were only available by Kickstarter. That's nothing new. I think it was the King Pledge or whatever. But the challenge is a lot of the missions in the supplemental books and missions that are produced outside of it assume you have the King Pledge or the Conqueror Pledge and assume that you have access to these miniatures. So there are some expansion missions that you just can't necessarily play. Does that really affect the game? Well, there's so many missions as it is, so much replayability, so many new missions created by the fan community. It's not really that much of an issue. But for me, being a completionist, it's always kind of bothered me a little bit. But being a Conan enthusiast, absolutely. Right there. Amazing. A lot of fun. Jumping in with Descent 2nd Edition. Descent 2nd Edition, dungeon crawling based game, Overlord based game. There are mechanics for solo play, co-op play. It works. It's a lot of fun. It's solid. But I would have to say if you don't already have the game, then it's definitely not something to buy into because there's too many expansions, too much time that has passed, and there are other dungeon crawlers out there. But it is one that I regularly play and I regularly enjoy. The last entry in this pile 1, and then 2 games worth mentioning, if you're still with me here following, Seventh Continent. This is a card-based, exploration-based game. I did not jump in on the Kickstarter, so it's just retail. I enjoy it. It's a great solo game. You're exploring the continent. There's a lot of hidden things on the cards to explore and do. There's some crafting. There's some questing. There's some survival. It's a fun game. It's an interesting mechanic. Replayability is there, but the quests, they're called curses, are so long, and there's enough expansions. Even without replayability, I'm halfway through the game, and I've been playing it like solo pretty regularly for like a year. I mean, absolute value from that perspective. Setup, takedown, takes a while because you got to refile the cards and everything, but it's certainly a unique title, and it's not like sci-fi. It's not in the past kind of dungeon crawler fantasy based. It's kind of in this middle ground. So it fulfills that part of my collection that isn't necessarily always there. Okay, tier 2 titles worth mentioning because they might jump to your tier 1. First is TI. You knew it was coming. Twilight Imperium. I have what edition are we up to now? The one before this current edition. But there is a current edition of Twilight Imperium. Everything about this game that you read is absolutely true. This is an amazing space opera. You are just out there trying to build up your empire. Lots of ways to do it. Military might, tech, political intrigue. The game is fantastic. The game really is. You can't solo it at all. You need to sit down with a bunch of players. We know the rules. I'm about like 99% of the rules. But it takes 7 or 8 hours to play. The reason why this is not a tier 1 game is because you have to be able to find players that can say, hey, are you ready to play this weekend for 8 hours? Are you ready to take place in this space opera? As such, it hits the table maybe 5 or 6 times a year. We schedule it. We play it. It's high planning and high strategy. Most of my games, I'm rolling dice and blowing stuff up. But there is a lot of tactica, a lot of different ways to win. The experience that it delivers is fantastic. Lots of little miniatures, lots of cards, lots of tokens, lots of tiles. It just works. Okay, jumping off to something very boutique. Kingdom Death Monster. KDM. This would be a tier 1. Sometimes it's a tier 1. Kingdom Death Monster is a survival horror-based game. No spoilers. You're just awakened as survivors. You have to build a settlement. You have to hunt monsters. You have to fight these boss monsters and survive lantern years, survive a number of years. There is a story going on. There is a narrative. The game is absolutely crazy in that the monsters that you fight, your characters just die, get killed, explode, all sorts of stuff. You have a settlement, so when a character dies, you do lose the abilities, you do lose the stuff, but you can bring another character on board. You can also swap them out and utilize that. This game, it's an acquired taste. The miniatures are a little bit weird. The artwork's a little bit weird. I understand the universe. But what works about it, on the 3 levels it works. The first is complete crafting system. So you hunt these monsters, you get components. What components you get depends on the hunt. So certain monsters, no spoilers, will drop. Here's the monster I fight. Here's the potential 15 components it can drop. Do I get the ones that I want? Do I get the ones that I need? Do I fight it again? You literally build your settlement. You literally refine, build gear, build armor, build weapons. And there's tons and tons of different ways you can do that. So you have this phase of the game where like you're planning your hunt, you're building your stuff, you're getting everything ready. Then you go out on the hunt. When you're out on that hunt and you fight the monster, the deck is controlled by an AI deck. And it's not just, so it's a card. You flip the card over and it tells you what to do with the monster. But it's reactive in that it's not just like flip it over and the monster attacks the closest. I mean, sometimes it does that. Sometimes it'll use abilities. Sometimes it will look and say if a character has this, it goes after this, it does that. There's also reactive cards, meaning if you hit the monster in a certain way, it's critical, it'll change its AI, it'll go after something, it'll do something. And of course, this deck is random, so even if you fight the same monster, you understand what it's going to do, but it could be different every time. What is kind of scary about this game, and I still get this feeling when I play it now, but those first few times I played the game, the AI felt like it was real. Out of all the titles I have, out of all the titles I've played, this is the closest thing to feeling like, is someone controlling this monster? Like, is some AI controlling it and like, texting in the commands and I'm just like moving it? It is really, really good with how these monsters act and how they fight, combined with the crafting, combined with the insanity of the whole thing. Massive replayability, a lot of fun, hidden quests, just so much to discover. This is the type of game, I guess this with Magic Realm would be the two games I would just hang out with for forever, and I'd be good. I'd be fine. The challenge is this, and this depends on perspective. The core box is massive. I think the core box is like $400 USD, $450. That's a lot. Now, is it a lot? Is that a lot? If you're playing Warhammer 40K, you're like, that's nothing. That's like 4 units in a tank. And then I got to build it and paint it and buy like 10 other units before I can even play the game. From the perspective of a board game, I don't know. Is that a lot? I mean, I was eyeing Return to Dark Tower and I'm looking at some other titles and I'm like, they're 190, 200 USD. I mean, I remember back when I bought Descent First Edition, that was like groundbreaking because that was one of the first games that was $100. But you're like, hey, it's a big box, you get a ton of stuff. Now, I think most games are around 80 to 100 USD. So in exploring that, the counter I give, and I'm not saying it's yes or no, it depends on the circumstances. The core box is $450, but this is also a miniature-based game. So you do have to build the miniatures. You can build the monsters, you can build some of the survivors. There are generic survivors you can use, but what's interesting about the game is there are literally miniatures for every item set. So if you upgrade to bone armor and bone weapons, there are weapons and armor sets for that. There are miniatures for that. So from that perspective, if you say it's like 400, 450, amazing components, amazing miniatures, tons and tons of miniatures, all of a sudden it's really not that expensive because it's a miniature-based board game that is literally one-to-one if you want to do it. Now, a buddy of mine that's also got KDM, he's an excellent painter and modeler. He's nuts. He's got everything magnetized. He's like, so if you have bone armor, but you've got this type of sword, he pops off the arm, pops back the arm, magnetized with those little rare earth magnets. I've got them built static, but there's lots of different ways to play it. I have not painted my miniatures for that. I did kind of an airbrush marble bone white effect because that's also to paint and intimidate. And I'm usually playing it and not painting it. Expansions. There's expansions out there. The expansions are about 75 to 100. And you say, well, that's for a couple of miniatures and a model and cards. The expansions are a little bit pricey. But what they add in playability and replayability is huge. And these boss fights, boss monsters, no spoilers, their abilities are so crazy, so powerful, and the storyline behind them that you interact with, I haven't experienced it anywhere else. Out of all of the miniatures in my collection, out of all the titles in my collection, so this is why this game is tier 2, and then I'll leave it with this, because this was only supposed to be like a 12 or 13 minute vlog, tops. This is tier 2 because you can casually play Kingdom Death Monster. You could roll up a character very fast, play 2 or 3 Lantern Years in, maybe 2 or 3 hours. And I've done that, and we've gotten that experience. But where the game really shines is sitting down with friends and playing every week and building your settlement. I mean, you are literally building a settlement. You are literally crafting. You are literally sending out adventurers. You are exploring that. You are dealing with that. From that perspective, the game shines with the hunt and the story. There's a story going on in the back, a lot of different choices, just absolutely amazing. It's tier 2 because to get that experience, it has to set up. It's also kind of tier 1 because, like Magic Realm, this is an amazing solo game. This game, you could run the settlement, you can run everything. Regularly, I'll be like, you know what, I need some Kingdom Death Monster. Set it up on my gaming table, and it'll be up there for like a month and a half, 2 months. And maybe I'll have a great settlement, maybe not so great, but it has that focus and it has that playability. So here's one final piece. I love dungeon crawlers, but what I love more, it's coming from my D&D background, I love fighting dragons. Any game that I can fight a dragon, it's got to happen. If I'm looking at titles and there's a dragon fight, then that title just got elevated. So HeroQuest, the dragon expansion, I'm in. Playing other type of games, I'm in. If it's a card-based game, Pathfinder, the adventure card game, not really a spoiler, there's dragons in there, can fight them, absolutely. It's just something personally that I really, really love. Sad face because Conan, I tried to get the dragon expansion miniature. I've been trying and trying and trying. I would love to be able to fight Conan against the dragon. So I love dragon-based games. And I pushed up to my playlist, I think under the board game, the Fight a Dragon titles that I have in my collection. Out of all of those, Kingdom Death Monster, one of the bosses, this is an expansion pack, is a dragon. You can see the miniature. You can pick him out right here, right? He is so massive. When you fight him, the scale, it feels like a dragon. His, no spoilers, his, hers, it, the background story and the quests are amazing, fantastic. The battles are epic. They are amazing. The only thing that comes second to that is the dragon in Dark Souls, the board game. But this is probably one of the hardest, most interesting, most complex dragon encounters that I've ever played. So for that reason, Kingdom Death Monster also comes to the top. Tier 3, maybe we'll jump into. There's a couple of fun titles there, but like I said, it's primarily Tier 1, games that I regularly play. Tier 2, games that I love, that I want to play, that I do play, but they kind of require the stars to align outside of solo. And Tier 3, games that are solid in my collection, and I play, but they kind of cross over with Dungeons & Dragons, they cross over with Warhammer 40K, they cross over with other elements. So I tend to get my fix from that.